but they've more than doubled their earned revenue. Like in 1 year, they more than doubled their earned revenue.
Hi, Lynette. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for joining me. So, as always, I like to just jump right into the conversation. What advice would you give a nonprofit arts leader when it comes to marketing, telling their story? Are there repetitive challenges that you see out there?
Yeah. I'd say the biggest challenge is picking up where somebody else left off and doing the exact same thing that the person before them did and not questioning why. So we see a lot, especially when it comes to arts marketing, jumping into budgets, and they will do exactly the same thing that they've been doing from a advertising and marketing standpoint for the last 10 years. It doesn't work anymore, and then they're wondering, why am I not getting sales? Why are my audiences dwindling? And a lot of times it's because they're not utilizing the best strategy anymore because they never revisited and they never checked the data to kind of make sure that they're staying on top of things.
So, what's changed? So, if you say, they did something 10 years ago, what are you seeing now that perhaps they're doing that they should be adapting in a different way? Can you give me a specific?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's harder now than it was before. It used to be you'd buy traditional media, you'd send your ads off, and then they would run and you'd get people. And it doesn't work like that really anymore. Now it's digital. So, digital advertising is where, for the most part, for everybody that's in that under $5 million mark that I work with, and that's where they need to be spending their money first, is in the digital advertising realm. But they also need to be creating a ton of content. You almost need to be like a media, like your own media firm now. And it doesn't have to be curated content. That is a misconception. That was a couple years ago. Everything needed to be curated, and that has shifted. And now, actually, behind the scenes content, walking around backstage, talking to the camera, filming it on your phone, that content performs better than creating a really expensive commercial. And that's one of the big shifts is traditional advertising is super expensive. So they're spending a lot of money and digital is so much more effective.
Okay, so this is then what I don't understand. When budgets are so tight and the resource pool doesn't seem to be getting any better, and you're saying now expensive content creation, media is expensive, why wouldn't they think to change and adapt to a more not only budget friendly, but attention grabbing way of communicating?
I don't think it's because I think it's they just don't realize maybe, or again, I'm actually going to stop and like pull myself back because I think it's actually a bigger conversation than that. That is a side effect of having an overwhelming workload. And so I think what happens is people get into, I just have to get it done. I have to get it done. And they're like running on the treadmill as fast as they can and they're not getting anywhere and they're afraid to stop. And that's what they need to do. They need to stop and evaluate where they are and make sure that they are not running in place and they're actually running in the right direction now. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, but really I think that it's a side effect of a bigger issue that nonprofit and arts organizations have as a whole.
So that's a great point. You and I talked about this before. I don't even know. I agree with you 100% because when I go and talk to organizations, whether it's for advocacy or development, marketing's in there a little bit because I think they all overlap. How do you convince a client to stop? Because they're in such that crush mode all the time. I've had clients where it's like, we just need to get through the concert series. We just need to get this done. And as soon as we get it done, then we're going to take the time and we're going to strategize. But then something comes up or 2 weeks go by and that momentum. And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh my gosh, we have the next concert in 3 months. We don't have time to stop and think about strategy. Right. It is an endless, it never. So how do we get them to stop? And what I often think about is would the audience really notice if we did maybe one less something to shore up the strategic plan and then move forward? Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't feel like I'm articulating it great, but
I think you're
Okay.
saying like how much would the fall off be if they just took a second to stop and reevaluate? And my
Yes.
thing is what they are doing might not be working anyway. So there might not be
Correct.
any fallout. And the plus side of that is you'll, save your employees and your staff's and your own sanity in that when you're in that constant mode. And my thing, and I'm going to say it's not ever easy to get anybody to stop doing what they're doing and like just stop. That is actually really difficult to do. A lot of times we run it in tandem where we'll start planning further in advance on certain things so that we can catch up at a certain point and not be in this constant state of chaos. But yeah, the other thing that happens too is people get burnt out and then they literally cannot plan because they need that downtime just to like reset and get ready to do that again. And I feel like I lost point of the question. What was your, can you
No,
circle back?
because no, this no, it's great because so when you do start, and I agree, start planning because I've worked with individuals or organizations where they want to plan a VIP reception but it's clear it's like, well, why? Are you just doing this just to do it? What's it for? Well, we want to treat our sponsors, but okay, we'll get into that later. The point of the first question was, where do you find somebody on the team to help you take one segment to pre-plan for something 6, 9, 12 months from now? Or are you just doing that yourself as the consultant?
I mean, we do it ourselves as the consultant. Like that's what we do is we help them through that process. We also like there are free resources where you can do it yourself too. My thing is like take it one step at a time. When you're looking at an entire let's say it's a concert or like the opera or someone that has like a regular season. If you're looking at the whole season and you're thinking, my gosh, I need to do all this planning and I need to brainstorm and all this stuff, at once, then it feels overwhelming. If you take it, there's 5 shows, 6 shows in a season, and you do one show for an hour one week, the next week you do the next show, the next week you do the next show, and then you start to pull these calendars together with all the tasks associated with it. So you don't end up in that fire, fire, fire mode where you're like, okay, that show just closed. Now I have to sell the next one. Well, you're not going to get the best sales out of that. You're leaving money on the table in that scenario. You have to plan ahead because people are looking for things to do and they're looking to learn and plan and educate themselves on what's coming up, even if they don't convert till that very end. If you're not talking to them about the things that are coming up, they just won't do it. So there's crossover on all these too.
Right. So
Yeah.
a lot of social media, predominantly ads or comments, promotions that I see are organizations, particularly performing arts, where they are promoting the cast or they're
You and I, we people don't care about the cast. I'm sorry. I hate to say that. Like, as an artistic director or an actor performer, like, I know that that is a wonderful moment for you. And I think that's great. But the website and the social media post is not for you. That is for your audience. We are trying to get them to come see you on stage. And so they'd rather know about the character, about the ballet, about, the reason why this was created. So like they want to know the ins and outs of things more so than just, John Smith is playing
yeah,
this
but
character.
yes, I would argue though, unless it was like Tom Hanks or right. I mean, if
Obviously.
we're talking
Yes,
about somebody that is a favorite
absolutely.
Academy, yes, they've got a brand and
They
you're
do.
marketing their brand. But the John Smith doesn't resonate with me. He may be in this very small niche art closet world that I call, we got to get out of the arts closet. But I agree. I just saw something the other day where it was, and the comments of like best performance ever. I can't even remember. I should have written it down, but it was like best performance ever by so and so. You got to see it. Well, why? Why do I have to see it? Like there's no context to that. So I want to know, or I often say, if we could think like a brand, like Nike or Porsche, or I'm going to wear Nikes because I want to feel like an Olympic athlete. Right. Or so am I on to
Yeah. You're so funny. Like that's Nike is the one that I compare to also. So Nike and Apple is like if you're looking to see how to do things, go look at what the big guys are doing because they're spending gobs and gobs of money doing research. Um,
right.
but yes, yeah, the a lot of, and I think again, this goes to another another bigger conversation, but I think a lot of times people think, well, they should just like our brand and they should know us. And like if we're putting something on stage, they should just know it's going to be good. And yeah, you will have some people, probably your subscribers or people that have been coming for years, that they might not know what the show's about, but they know you do a good job. So they're going to come to everything you do. Joe Schmo off of the street is not going to respond to that. So if you're not building that audience too and bringing in new audience members, then you're going to slowly deplete over time. And we are seeing that right now where some audiences are aging out at this point.
Yeah. So you've mentioned twice that something's a bigger conversation. Should we just have the bigger conversation? Because what is that?
I think there's so many of them, but I think I would say the biggest conversation is that, well, I think it's three things. One, like arts is not funded at the level it should be funded for the amount of good that it does in our community. Like that to me, this arts is just not funded well. We should not expect people to work off of their passion instead of paying them the way they deserve to be paid. So that's one of them. And because of that, then I think that we lose key people in this industry all the time because they burn themselves out because their expectation is so high that people are going to work because they feel passionate about the art. So that's one of them. I think the second one is we have a lot of people that end up in leadership positions that have never had the training on how to lead an organization of any size. A lot of times they're artists and they feel, again, very passionate for the art and they kind of work their way up into that leadership role, but nobody's ever trained them on how to do it and how to run it like a business. So this is a business. It's an art form, but the art form is the product. The business still needs to exist and be sustainable long term. And that's the third part, which is because we expect this to be nonprofit. Nonprofit is a tax status. That does not mean that you don't make a profit in the business. And you need to build the profit so that you can build long term sustainability for the organization. If you're, every month on your bank account, you're coming back like zeroed out. I spent this much and I brought this much, and there's no money getting invested in your future. Like eventually you're going to have problems. And that's where I think we are with a lot of these arts organizations because stuff that worked 10 years ago does not work anymore. And because audiences have responded different now, they don't have sustainability in place anymore.
Yeah, to be honest, it's really amazing. I think that a lot of the organizations that are around are still around. And I mean that with love, right? I mean, I spend my entire living, breathing, waking moment, not even waking, I dream about arts funding. So I don't mean this as being harsh, but it amazes me how we're still in survival mode, which now I'm going to transition into the pandemic, which I don't like talking about the pandemic. I'm tired of talking about the pandemic. But I thought, wow, if this isn't the time to hit reset and shift how we fundamentally operate, this is it. I was shocked to see organizations after 18 months of devastation lean back into status quo of what we did before.
Yep.
Did you see the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They went back to where they were comfortable again. But again, people aren't responding that way anymore. Like they're not getting off their couches the way that they were before the pandemic. It shifted behavior. So you have to shift with that behavior. And it's sad that they shifted in the moment and then reverted back when it was over.
So one of my sayings is say no to the status quo. I like little rhyming things, right? So we're speaking the same language. Mm-hmm. Can you give me an inspirational story? Do you have one where it's working? Are you there yet where you have?
You mean what? I need more context for
I
what
know, I'm
part is
sorry.
working. Because a lot of things are working, they're just not all necessarily working together right yet.
So are you having success with some organizations in having them see what needs to change?
Yes.
And
yes.
Are they experiencing a positive result from them beginning to change? And can you give me an example?
yeah, I don't want to necessarily name names in this, but yeah, we do have one. We have a couple actually who have fully embraced our strategies. And that means like we're going into planning 12 to 18 months out. We start advertising 4 months out, but we start talking about things 8 months out. And we have a ridiculous amount of content that we expect them to produce and roll out. But they've more than doubled their earned revenue. Like in 1 year, they more than doubled their earned revenue. And for that, that was a theater group or a theater company, and they did musicals, which musicals are the easiest thing right now, honestly, to sell when it comes to theater groups. But they embraced all our digital strategies. They were not doing digital marketing at all. They were doing all traditional marketing. So we we stopped everything that they were doing and evaluated and started investing their money different. We did not increase their marketing spend at all. They were spending the same amount of money they'd always been spending. We just reallocated it to digital first, and content creation, because they were like, well, we don't have anybody on staff to do that. So we were able to take some of the money that they were investing in traditional media, turn it into digital, and because digital is cheaper, there was still enough room for them to pay someone to do the content. And I
Okay, so
actually, okay,
no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I actually did that not through Confluence, but I used to work for a ballet company, and I did that going in there too. Same thing. As I looked at the budget, it was like, how do we have all this money that we're spending on marketing and we're not bringing in more people? It just keeps falling off. Same thing. Reallocated to digital. Most of the reps in town for like newspapers and stuff don't like me anymore because I have to like tell people, like, you cannot spend your money that way. It just doesn't make sense for your budget.
Right, right.
But same thing, when we switched and we started investing our time in stuff that's actually working to move the needle, it's less stressful overall because you're not constantly scared you're not going to make your goal. Because we also are very, very big believers in data tracking, knowing where you are at every single moment so you can shift 6 weeks out instead of 6 days out from your event. Anyway, so same thing there, more than almost doubled the revenue. For that, it was a seasonal show that happens year over year, and we almost doubled it. I think we were like $50,000 off from doubling from 750 to 1.4 million in 4 years.
Okay, so yeah, so tip number one, or advice number one, is don't advertise traditionally anymore. I mean, is that
not first. So my thing is,
okay?
if you have, most of the people that we work with are very small arts organizations under $5 million. Like sometimes if you're in the $4 or $5 million mark, you probably have enough budget that you can start to invest in more traditional media. If you are under that mark, if you're in that 3 and under, you probably don't have the budget that you need to spend on something that is going to run in a newspaper one time.
Okay, time out, time out, time out. Oh my gosh, this is like, and I came from journalism media, so I have a lot of friends out there too, but does it even still work? Should you even still do traditional advertising if you're a 5 million and up organization? Does that work? Do you have the numbers that show that you are, I can't think of the word. What is the word? Like you're moving people to come to your event through traditional advertising.
Well, that's part of the problem, right? It's a lot harder to measure a traditional ad. Like it's a lot harder to measure a newspaper where circulation is going down, is only going in the paper one time. In that, a lot of times we have boards. So I will say that, like, we go into an organization, we want to shift them to digital, and the boards were like, no, I get all mine from the local newspaper. So we have to do an ad in the local newspaper. I say, go ahead and run that ad in the local newspaper with at least a 50% off code. And so then I want you to go back and measure how many of that 50% off code for those that
I get it.
selling.
You're discounting the ticket to see the transfer, the translation between that ad. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I should have said that. But then you can go back and say, like, okay, I spent $4,000 on this ad. It ran one time and I sold 10 tickets. That is a real story, by the way. So, like, it was $4,000 and I made 400. So we lost $3,600 on that one ad.
And I think my advice would be, this is just, I would suggest that maybe that board member pay for the advertising then. If that's what they really want to do, then put some skin in the game and pay for it. Fine. Like, that's okay. Anyway, so let's move on to digital, because I have often thought, okay, do digital ads really work? Because I spent 6 months at the beginning of this year talking only to millennial and Gen Zs, particularly people who are not in the arts, or I would say 95% not related to the arts. I wanted to know, where do you get your information? Do you engage in the arts? How do you hear about what's going on in your community? On and on and on. Surprisingly, I would say 90% of the 35 and under that I spoke with, they are only on one social media channel. If that, many don't even go on, which I think was very eye-opening to me. And because they're not engaged in the arts per se, that ad's not getting on their feed. So they get information, number one, word of mouth from
Mhm.
family and friends, churches, libraries. Those were like the three big things. Then I had suggestions about, well, do you have a restaurant week? Because we love to go do restaurant weeks, food trucks, those kinds of events. That's where they were interested. Like, oh, if I saw that there was a performance or a cool exhibit at the museum with partnership with a restaurant, yeah, I would go. Or if I knew that the museum was having an opening and there were going to be food trucks around, yes, that would be a cool experience. There were all these
Oh, yeah.
experiences. Is this sounding anything what you are seeing?
Yes. So experience is key. Like that is something that people are willing to spend money on and try something new, is experience. So just calling out that word that you just used. Yes and no. So email, if they're already related to you, like that is your number one conversion from a digital standpoint is email first. A lot of them are finding news on like websites where they might list arts events or events happening around town. My thing is word of mouth is a very high conversion rate too. So that's why you want to do digital. So even if the people that aren't on there are like if their friends and other people are on there, the more people that you're reaching with your messaging, the more word of mouth you get from other people. Does that make sense? Like
It
it's
does.
real.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're right. And you know, the other thing too that I heard so much about, which was that candlelight
Yeah.
violin, right? Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
Absolutely. On TikTok I get them
I
all the time.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, there was like multiple of them saying, they either went or they would love to go. It was a birthday or anniversary. And it was like, where is this? That and the immersive Van Gogh,
Mm-hmm.
like that was another one that they kept bringing up all the time. So, and the definition of art, which is part of Arts Redefined, we need to re-examine what art means. Art was any performance is
Yeah.
considered art to that generation, that age group.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I suggest, as far as content creation, think of yourself or the organization like an influencer, or get an influencer to come in. And it's a similar thing to what you just said, and have them create content for their own channel. So
Yeah.
people who aren't necessarily following the ballet, but if this influencer, quote unquote, goes to the ballet and can show what this experience was like. And I think there was like the Royal Ballet in England, somebody did this to where it was showing them sipping their champagne outside and then realizing, oh, we can't take a drink in. So we're downing our champagne before we go in. It was just very interesting to see these little tips on how you approach this experience.
Yes. And I talk about that all the time actually is that people want to know what they're going to experience before they experience it. And so that's the content. If you get asked a question all the time, make a piece of content to answer that question. If you're like the experience of if you can take drinks to your seat, that's a piece of content. If you can't take drinks to your seat, that's a piece of content. Like it sounds overwhelming when you start thinking about like you need 46 pieces of content to market something well. But if two of those are like, arriving and showing what the front of the building looks like. Here in town where I live, there's a theater that is inside of a government building. And you would never know where that theater is. And so it's so frustrating for people trying to go as an audience member to figure out where to go. So what do? You take your phone and you walk and you show them what it looks like, and then you send that out in a pre-show email so they know where they're going. It's again, we're answering all of these questions for them ahead of time. We're taking that friction out of their
Yes.
life. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm envisioning all of these travel influencers or people that say walk with me when they're in a city. That's what they're doing all the time, is just walk with me, and they're showing walking down a street in Italy or in Germany or wherever they are.
Yeah.
It's so common sense that I don't know, but we're not doing it. So you said 42 pieces of content for
46.
one. 46. So that's a literal, you didn't just throw that number out there.
No,
So
that's our number.
talk, okay, can you
That's
talk
our
me?
number. Like we actually have a whole training session on all of that because it feels so overwhelming to people when we say a number like that. But it's based on the timing of when you need to start talking about an event. And so if you're starting to talk about an event 6 months out, you have to have content 6 months out, which means you probably don't have any real content yet, right? Like you're working with maybe a show logo or maybe, a director name or a choreographer name, and like that's it, that's all you've got to go on. So typically we say far out, you start creating your own content to fill that need. As you get closer to the event, you will start naturally having more content, but you're also going to be posting about it more. So it's like a slow, it's almost like going up a hill, right? Like you're rolling up that hill and you're starting at the bottom and you're like trudging up, but as you get, or maybe it's the other side. I
Downhill?
don't know,
Yeah.
downhill. Either way, it's a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie and say it's not a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it is a ramp up to starting. This is where it's like you're layering the content. You have five
Right.
events coming up, one's 6 months out, one's 3 months out, one's next month. You're going to talk about the one next month the most, but then the one that's 3 months out, you're still going to talk about that often. And the one that's 6 months out is still going to get mentioned in that mix so that we're not doing that mad scramble at the end.
Oh, okay. So when you're 6 months out and you say you don't have much content, because now I'm thinking of particularly, well, it could be visual or performing arts, right? Because we do have calendars that we somewhat most know, what next season or what it's going to look like. So what advice do you have on what should you talk about when you're at the 6 month point out and you don't have a lot of the meat of the content to share?
So, okay, we're going to do a deep dive for a second here. So, I don't know if you've ever heard of Capacity Interactive. They're an arts marketing firm in New York, and they work with primarily like the larger arts organizations. And they do a boot camp every year where it's like all digital arts marketing people in the room. And I'd say it was probably 7 years ago. They said, "Your ordinary is someone else's extraordinary." And I remember that. And it is like I have embraced that with like wide open arms. And so creating content, like it doesn't have to be curated content. It just has to be cool. And so a ballet company, for example, I worked at a ballet company. I've seen Nutcracker 1,000 times. I've seen people put point shoes on and tie point shoes like multiple times a day for years and years and years. But some people don't even know how a point shoe works. They don't know how to tie a point shoe. They don't understand like the process of breaking in a point shoe. How do they sew ribbons on a point shoe? Like how they roll up onto it, what the different positions of the feet are. Like all of that is content that you can talk about. And then it doesn't even have to sell anything specifically. You don't have to talk about anything specific. You just need to be educating your audiences on different things. So we say you should have like pillars or like, just kind of thoughts and things of how you kind of organize your content. And they should either align emotionally with someone, so like the value system that you have, like we are like them, you are like me, I connect with you, like that is an alignment connection with another human being. And you can do that on scale through your content. The other one is it should be entertaining. Like that one can be a pillar, it's just entertaining. And that would be like a show trailer of like what you're going to see when you're on stage. It can be educational, and that might be like showing people how to get into the theater. It might also be an interview with a director. It might be an interview with a cast member. It might be talking about what the characters are in the show and what their backstories are. And like there's all these little things that you can do to put these together. And then the fourth one is sales. And sales is only 20% of your content. The other 80% is not sales messaging. It is just content. Um,
Yeah.
we're really doing like a very
No, because this relates a lot to brand building. Again, when you're going out,
yes.
it's like they often say that, and I've heard of three, but sales could be in there. It's like your content should either relate, educate, or be funny, entertain. So
Yeah.
it
Yep.
should be relatable to your avatar, educates that, and then be funny. Sales also is in there. What you described though is I view as you're always selling, even when you're not selling. You are
That's what yes. But you're not saying like buy tickets now. Like you don't
because
need to
that
put that in there. Because
right.
that'll actually yes.
And
Oh,
here's another thing, and tell me if I'm wrong. When, and this is getting off a little bit from what you do or maybe not, but when they do the intro welcome to a performance and they talk about there's a donation, whatever, feel free to donate, blah, blah, blah. Why are we doing that?
yeah. I think that it has its time and place. If there's a story that you are telling that
Right.
moves people and connects people to them emotionally and makes them want to give a donation. If you're just saying donate to us, that again, why? Why am I doing that? If you, this is more you, I think, is like, what is the impact that you are putting, like giving to your community? That's when people donate. Like
Right.
that's what they need to know. They need to know the impact because they want to support their community. Like the data shows that people want to support their community. And a lot of times they'll buy tickets to something and then never actually even go just because they feel like they're supporting the art in their community. But we need to talk about the impact to that to the community and the impact in the arts, which I know you feel very strongly about too, so I won't go down
Yes.
that.
No.
But
No,
it's
we I
all
mean
they're all connected. It's
they
all
are.
yes, it's
Yes.
all
Yeah.
connected.
So to speak about communicating impact and all of that, how much do you work in with grant writers or development or things like that? Do you get into that at all, or is
Not
your storytelling is primarily external to the
external.
public?
Yeah. Yeah. We do, if they don't have a fundraising person or they don't have a development or donor, like there is a lot of crossover between marketing and development. And so we will talk about like, if you're sending out that letter, it better have impact in it, you know, the impact of your, for your community in there. And we'll review things and make sure it's like not, we hope you'll join us and we want you to do this. No, like it's not
Right.
about you, it's about them. So thank you for your, you know, that kind of stuff. But as far as like development campaigns and like identifying impact and all of that, that's outside of our realm.
Yep.
So
But there's always a through line that has to go
there's
between,
100%.
because we've talked about organizations that operate in silos, and the education outreach doesn't know what the sales outreach doesn't know what the development outreach, which that boggles me because you have to know what everybody else is doing. So you're all in sync and you're all rowing in the same direction, not in a circle where it's never ending. Okay. Go back real quick to this one client who you said you doubled in the strategies, right? Doubled the earned revenue. How long did that take? So
That was
from
our
the time that you
first
got
season.
in,
So we didn't even start at the beginning of their season. We came in late fall. And so they have they're a 7 show theater. So they do 7 shows a year. And we missed the first show. So we came in at show number 2. And they had doubled it by the end of that season. So within less than a year, we had doubled.
so they immediately adopted your strategies. When
Uh-huh.
you go into an organization, how long does it take you to see their operations and know what needs to be implemented and what that rollout looks like?
A lot of times we know after the first conversation what needs to probably shift. It usually takes about I would say 3 months before most of the arts organizations will start to see any impact. And a lot of times there's a lot of structure that is missing that supports the marketing for the organization. And so if you're building the structure, that has to be in place in order for it to be effective. That can sometimes take a little bit longer. But typically we see people, and again, you have to like buy completely in. And it's not, I'm not going to say like it's easy. It becomes easier like as you get used to working that far out. But initially it's hard to stop the chaos. So
It sounds like a diet. if you buy in completely, or not even like healthful eating, and if you buy into it completely, you're going to see results. If you sneak a little bit here and there, it's slowly going to erode and you're going to go back to where you were at the beginning. Okay. I could talk with you forever. I'm looking at the time. All right. I have a couple questions. One, I just want to say, is there one fundamental piece of advice? Is there just one that you could leave with someone who's thinking, where do I even start? Aside from finding your contact information, which we will include in the show notes, they can reach out and contact you if they want you to come in and talk with them. But is there one fundamental piece of advice that you would give?
I mean, always digital. If you're not doing digital, you have to do digital advertising. Like, that's step one. But I think my biggest one is you're probably doing a really good job. And I think that is something that I have heard over and over and over and over again. I don't even know if I'm doing a good job. I'm trying so hard. I don't know if I'm doing well. You probably are. More than likely you're doing a good job. You're doing a good thing. You just have too much on your plate. So step one is identifying your priorities. Like that, I would say 95% of the time we go in and help them identify the priorities that are going to move the needle so they can let go of the stuff that doesn't work because they just don't have time to do it all. So I'd say that's my big thing. Like, you're doing a good job. You really are. You're doing a beautiful thing for our world. So like, keep it up, but don't burn yourself out.
Yeah, take a breath, take a beat, and sometimes it's better to just pause, put the pause button on, and regroup or figure out the whys. Why are you doing it? Rather than just keep going and saying, we can't stop. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. I like to end the conversation asking everybody the same question. So if you've been listening, you would know it's coming. If not, that's okay. What color do you love the most and why?
This one. This is my favorite color, like an aquamarine teal. I don't know why. It makes me happy when I look at it. I like water, I think, and it feels like the beach and the ocean, and like, just so I have it in my hair and I have it on my clothes, and it's just my favorite color.
Yeah. And I love almost every person talks about how a color makes them feel, which is so interesting. Although somebody once said their favorite color was blue because they said all blue foods taste good. And I couldn't think of any blue foods, but there was blueberries. Right. Anyway, aqua. Yeah, it looks teal for me. It's very pretty. So, Lynette, thank you so much for your time. We will make sure that everybody can find your contact information. You are a rock star, and just keep doing what you're doing because you are making a difference.
Same back at you.